At 10:47 a.m., a bank alert about a $3.2 million villa lit up my son's phone. By noon, mine was vibrating like a hive. By evening, the entire town seemed to have an opinion about my sanity. All it took was refusing to play the family's script. 3 days earlier, March 15th. My 64th birthday came and went, the way it has for years, unexpectedly. If you listen to my son Michael and his wife Lauren. So busy, terrible timing, they say, while packing for their annual spring escape with Lauren's mother, Diane Mercer, whose birthday, what a marvel, always lands in the same week. I noticed the pattern a long time ago. This year I tried something radical. I said nothing. No hints, no reminders, no, "Are you free this weekend?" I waved from the porch as they rolled out of the driveway toward a spa in Vermont. The moment their car vanished, I called Claudia Park at Harbor & Coast Realty. "Find me the most luminous waterfront home within 50 miles, I said. "Assume the budget won't be the problem." 4 hours later, we stood in the glassy hush of a modern villa facing the soundlight pooling across stone floors. The place didn't ask to be justified, it simply fit. Claudia cleared her throat. "Evelyn, it's 3.2. "I'll take it," I said. "Would you like to discuss it with your family?" I smiled. When was the last time they discussed anything with me? By the next afternoon, the deed carried my name. By Thursday, I'd posted a few careful photos, the sun flooding the living room, a celebratory flute of champagne beside a single candle. Caption, "A birthday gift to myself." Sometimes the best permission is your own. That's when the phones detonated. Michael called 5 minutes after the purchase alert. I let it ring out. Lauren tried next, then Diane. The messages traveled from cheerful concern to brittle alarm. My favorite, "This isn't like you. Please call so we know you're okay." They know the version of me who accommodates, who reshuffles her life around other people's convenience. Today they were meeting Evelyn Hart, a woman with her own key. I unpacked the essentials photo albums, my grandmother's dishes, the quilt my mother stitched, and arranged them like anchors in a new harbor. 23 missed calls later, I brewed tea and watched the water fold itself into silver bands. Finally, I answered Michael. "Mom, thank God. Tell me you didn't just buy a $3 million house." "I did," I said, looking out at a sailboat sliding through late light. "And it's lovely. Are you feeling all right?" "This is unlike you." There it was, again. Unlike you, as if my identity were a family heirloom they kept in a glass case. "I'm feeling better than I have in years." "Mom, you can't afford this. Dad's insurance wasn't Michael," I said gently. "There are parts of my finances you don't know." "What does that mean?" "It means I am not the fragile woman you've decided I am. And this conversation, it isn't over, but not tonight." I switched the phone off. The sea breathed in the dark, steady as a promise. Tomorrow could have the explanations, the spreadsheets, the opinions. Tonight was mine. At 11:04 a.m., the morning after the photos of the villa went up, I poured coffee, set my phone screen down, and opened the cedar box that held the few papers I'd kept locked away since last autumn. The envelope on top still smelled faintly of sandalwood. It was addressed in the clean, uncompromising hand of Aunt Lila Harrington, my father's sister, the one relative who never apologized for wanting the whole world, and then taking as much of it as she could reach. I hadn't shown that letter to anyone. Not to my son Michael, not to his wife Lauren, certainly not to Lauren's mother, Diane Mercer, whose opinions like ivy had crept over our family and taken root in places no one invited them. I'd read the letter once in the lawyer's office, then again that night in bed, and a third time when the leaves turned and the air began to taste like metal. Each reading rearranged some internal furniture. Each reading asked if not now, when. The letter wasn't flowery. Lila did not do embroidery. She wrote things like, "You are not a minor character in your own life, and sentimentality is often just fear wearing perfume." She left me her Back Bay brownstone and investment portfolio that had grown patient and muscular over 4 decades. and an art collection she'd assembled, one painting at a time while other people were collecting lovers and regrets. After taxes, costs, and the slow machinery of estates, the total came to just over $7.3 million. The number was less shocking than the instruction attached to it. Spend it like a person who remembers who she is. Lila had seen me clearly. She'd watched me set down pieces of myself after my husband died. One compromise here, of course, whatever is easiest for everyone there until the outline that remained could be carried around by other people's plans. She'd also seen the choreography that had sprung up in our family since Diane arrived. Agitation in early March, breathless talk of wellness and recoveries, a tidy migration north just in time for my birthday, and a casual promise to celebrate later, which, like a coupon with the wrong date, would never be redeemed. I folded the letter along its old crease and slid it back into the envelope. On the table lay the deed to the waterfront villa, still crisp enough to cut. Outside, the sound moved in broad strokes, the water making and unmaking 1,000 silvers. I had expected the calls. I hadn't expected the tone. The consensus that I had swerved out of character and needed to be guided back to the slow lane with hazard lights on. This isn't like you people kept saying, as though I were a museum exhibit mislabeled. The truth was simpler and far less dramatic. I had been like this all along, just quieter about it. By mid-afternoon, the gate camera caught a familiar car nose into the drive. Michael. He looked like a man who'd slept in spurts and made bargains with coffee. The moment I opened the door, he stepped in with a relief so obvious it must have embarrassed him. "Mom," he said, pulling me into a hug that was all sun and no accountant. Are you okay?" "I'm well," I said. "You?" He released me, eyes moving over the foyer, the light, the view that the builder had framed like a painting. He was collecting facts the way he always did when his emotions rode a little ahead of him. "Can we talk?" he asked. We moved to the kitchen. The new kettle hissed as if it had opinions. I set out 2 mugs the way muscle memory sets out the future without asking permission, and waited. "Look," he began the purchase. It scared me. Not because you don't deserve beautiful things, but because it felt sudden and big. "Property taxes on a place like this are roughly $32,000 a year," I said. "Yes, budgeted." He stopped. Something in his jaw eased, but then tensed again. "Mom," he tried softer, "I've been overseeing things since Dad died, only to keep you safe. It's not control, it's parenting," I said gently. "I recognize the species." He flushed, remembering every time he'd changed a setting on my phone because the icons looked confusing, every emergency joint account, every watchful alert for large transactions. He'd meant to build a fence and accidentally built a pen. "I don't want you to feel policed," he said. "It's not a feeling," I said, not unkindly. "It's a fact, and facts can be changed." We carried our mugs out to the deck. A single sail cut across the water, transparent as a lifted wing. The air had that pre-spring sharpness that promises and threatens at the same time. "I wish you'd told me about things," he said, finally, meaning the letter I hadn't shown him and the money I hadn't explained. "I could have helped you plan." "I know," I said, "but this time I needed to plan without being helped." "I'm not trying to keep you from living," I said. "I know that too." He stared at the horizon as if it could translate me. "Is this what you want?" Yes. I didn't need to raise my voice for the word to be solid. We talked an hour about nothing risky, about the view and the neighborhood, and whether the stairs would bother my knees in 10 years, before he stood, kissed my hair, and said he'd call later. At the door, he paused, then said without looking at me, "If you ever want me to stop getting the bank alerts, say the word." "Consider it said," I replied. Something unclenched in both of us. By evening, the concerned network had warmed up. My sister Nora called first. "Evie," she said, still using the nickname of our childhood, "I heard about the house. Are you having a moment?" "I'm having a life," I said. Moments are for sporting events and throat lozenges. She reminded me with sisterly efficiency that I was 64 and should think about appropriate transitions. I asked if she'd asked anyone's permission when she and her husband bought their Florida condo sight unseen because the sunset in the listing made her cry. She harumphed, said that was different, and then asked for pictures. I sent 3. Next came Nora's son Alex, deputized to check on Aunt Evie. He was polite and practical and somehow convinced that people over 60 are impulses wrapped in soft cardigans. I told him my purchase had been months in the making and that the only impulsive part had been the timing. He was silent long enough for me to imagine him revising a spreadsheet labeled Risk Elderly Relatives. The calls would have been funny if they hadn't felt like tiny repetitions of the same single note returned to your outline. Be legible to us. Take up less weather. I was not surprised when Lauren texted that she and Diane wanted to swing by for coffee in the morning. I replied, 8 works. If we were going to rehearse a scene, I preferred to choose the theater. They arrived at 8:00 a.m. Sharp, an efficiency I had always admired in other contexts. Diane stepped into the foyer and immediately assessed the house the way she assessed people for angles of advantage and evidence of bad taste. Well, she said, eyes flicking from marble to window to art niche, it's certainly expansive. Good morning to you too, I said. Coffee. Lauren smiled, clutching a manila folder so thick it gave itself weight. They perched at the kitchen island like they were appearing before a subcommittee. I set down coffee cream in the small sugar bowl my grandmother had loved and waited. Diane cleared her throat. Evelyn, dear, we're here because we love you. This was always the overture. Love as caution tape. Love as scaffolding around someone else's building. You've made a series of decisions, she continued, that concern us. The secrecy, the impulsivity, the social withdrawal. These are patterns. Lauren Eager slid the folder open. The top half was a glossy brochure of smiling couples playing board games in sunlight. A fountain in the background made a soft, convincing arc. These communities are vibrant, Lauren said quickly. Age-forward, built-in support activities, healthcare partnerships, everything you could possibly need. I turned a page. Heritage Landing, Golden Oaks, the Willows at Cedar Cove. Each offered the same curated version of later life tidy. Laughter, beige cardigans, a calendar full of gentle verbs. When I asked, did it become your job to research my address? It's not about your address, Diane said, sweeping in where Lauren hesitated. It's about safety, about having people around who can make sure you don't make an irrevocable mistake. Irrevocable, like buying a home, I asked. Diane's smile developed hairline cracks. Like isolating yourself in a property that exceeds your needs. Like spending at a level that will inevitably strain the family. There it was. The quiet thesis, at last the family budget includes you, Evelyn. Please keep your expenditures compatible with our projections. I didn't realize there were family projections, I said. Lauren reached for a gentler register. Mom, we only want you to be supported. Supported, I repeated. By whom? By us, she said softly. By community. I took a breath. I could either respond like a judge or like a woman who liked herself. I chose the latter. I appreciate your concern, I said. I recognize its pattern, its scent, its favorite words. But I don't consent to being managed. I am not a project, and this house is not a failure of judgment. It's a declaration of presence. I am not moving into a curated life because it makes my choices easier to narrate at brunch. Diane leaned forward, voice velveted. You're being selfish. I'm being specific, I said. You have a son who depends on knowing you're reasonable, she pressed. A daughter-in-law who juggles innumerable responsibilities while trying to include you. You owe the family predictability. There it was, again less quiet now, the appetite for certainty. People call it love, so it will bring its own groceries. Predictability, I said, is a lovely quality in weather and tax codes. I am neither. Lauren tried once more, her eyes bright with hurt. I didn't want to cause and wouldn't pretend away. We invite you to everything, Mom. We plan you into our lives. We always have. You plan me? I said. The way you plan. Centerpieces placed, admired and moved when needed. Tell me the last time anyone asked what I wanted to do instead of fitting me into an itinerary already laminated. No one answered. Outside, the water went on being water. Diane gathered the brochures in a tidy stack. When this house becomes too much, she said, when the view turns into a mirror you can't stand when independence proves lonelier than you anticipated. Don't expect us to pick up the pieces. I wouldn't dream of it, I said. They stood. Lauren hugged me quick and hard. Diane did not. At the door, Lauren turned. Will you think about it? Not the brochures maybe, but an arrangement where we help you more. I am thinking, I said. I'm thinking all the time. When they'd gone, the kitchen felt larger by an inch. The light skimmed the countertops like a hand. I stood alone and waited for the shame that Diane's speeches usually tugged from me. It didn't arrive. Something else did, a small, quiet pride that felt less like defiance and more like alignment. I wasn't convinced that solitude and joy were synonyms. I was convinced that compliance and love weren't either. That afternoon, Nora called again to report the family temperature. People are buzzing, she said, trying to sound neutral and failing adorably. Some think you're brave, others think you're reckless. Alex is building you a spreadsheet, God help us. I will accept the spreadsheet if it comes with lasagna, I said. She laughed, then grew serious. Are you happy, Evie? Not every minute, I said. But I'm myself every minute, and that's new. She was quiet for a long breath. I can live with that, she said. Send me more pictures. By late afternoon, the calls slowed. The house learned the sound of my steps. I unpacked Lila's blue vase and set it near the window where the light made it dramatic. I hung the quilt my mother had stitched from dresses we wore in 2nd grade. To the untrained eye, I was decorating. To me, I was taking possession not of square footage, but of narrative. I thought about Michael as a boy, the way he occupied a room with curiosity before caution. The dozens of Lego cities that rose and fell in our living room like small civilizations. When had that boy learned to confuse guardianship with love? Perhaps when grief bent us into unfamiliar shapes. Perhaps when fear entered the house and we mistook it for wisdom because it kept the lights off and the volume down. Sometime after dusk, my phone buzzed with a message from Michael, dinner soon. Just us? I smiled. Yes, I typed. Just us. The next morning before sunrise, rubbed the water awake, I took Lila's letter out one more time. I didn't need its courage so much as its clarity. She had written near the end, "You don't owe the world your smallness." I said it aloud to the empty kitchen to test its weight. It did not float. It anchored. At 9:10 a.m., the intercom crackled delivery. A stranger handed me a bouquet of white ranunculus and a card from Michael for the new harbor. I'm learning. The flowers looked like rolled-up promises. By late morning, I walked the neighborhood path that stitched the bluff to the narrow beach. 2 older women in windbreakers power walked past me, and one called, "You the new woman in the glass house," I said. "Yes." She grinned. "Welcome to the fish bowl," she said. "Best view in town." The other added, "Also the worst privacy, but you get used to it." I laughed, grateful for the crash course. The town was already assigning me a place. Fine. I would fill it on my terms. Back home, I flipped through the folder Lauren had forgotten on the island. The brochure corners were painfully cheerful. Tucked among them was a printout about durable power of attorney highlighted in yellow. I felt a small righteous anger at the assumption threaded through the document that my future should be easier to sign than to ask for. I slid the printout into a drawer and texted Raymond Nash, the estate attorney who had handled Lila's affairs. Lunch. I'd like to update a few documents. We met at a place with too much brass, and a waiter who called me dear in a way that somehow didn't condescend. Raymond, in his usual navy tie, congratulated me on the purchase, and with competent efficiency asked what I wanted to change. 3 things I said. First, revoke any old powers of attorney that aren't strictly necessary. Second, set up clear beneficiary designations that avoid doubt and discourage committees. Third, draft a letter formal, polite, legally crisp, clarifying that my affairs are managed by me unless and until a court of law, not a breakfast meeting, says otherwise. He smiled. You want a paper trail that says I'm at the wheel? Exactly, I said. By the time I left, a draft packet waited in my inbox. I walked to the car feeling several degrees taller than when I'd arrived. That evening, I cooked myself a lazy celebratory dinner pasta that pretended to be effortful and a salad that didn't, and carried the plate to the deck. The water was the blue of stubborn ink. A gull perched on the railing like punctuation. I thought of Diane, of the tribe she led so expertly, the school of well-meaning strategists, who could plan your life into a corner and then praise you for how neatly you fit. I believed she loved Lauren. I even believed she was protecting me. I simply no longer believed that their protection had anything to do with my life. Near nightfall, my phone buzzed with a message from Lauren. "I'm sorry if we came on strong this morning. We worry." I stared at the words long enough to see the sincerity in them. I typed, "I know, I'll be okay." After a beat, I added, "Let's try dinner too. Soon." She replied with a heart. I breathed out. The day closed like a good book. Not because it resolved everything, but because it placed me. I was not a mystery to be solved by committee. I was a person who had chosen a house because it looked like the life I wanted: wide windows, long light, a view that kept me honest. And somewhere between 11:04 and 39:26, a quiet reordering had taken place. I had not become fearless. I had become willing to let people be dismayed, to let myself be misread, to sign documents with my own hand and in my own name, to be a woman whose phone could ring without automatically needing to answer. Tomorrow there would be more opinions, and probably an apology elaborately baked into a cake. Tomorrow there might be a sunset that made me think of Florida condos and hand-stitched quilts, and sisters who can't help but try to help. Tomorrow Michael and I would sit across a small table and eat something unremarkable and practice speaking to each other without the ghost of supervision in the room. Tonight I washed 2 plates dried, 2 mugs, locked 2 doors, and told the house I would try to be equal to it. If Aunt Lila was listening, I hope she approved. On a rainy Thursday, I opened the bottom drawer of my late husband's desk, the one that always stuck, and then gave with a sigh, and found a manila folder tucked behind obsolete warranties. In his careful block letters, it read, "Michael Private." The label was so unlike him it made my stomach tilt. Inside bank statements, credit card summaries, and an application for a second mortgage on Michael's house. My name appeared on the signature line as co-signer in a hand that looked like mine but wasn't. I stared until the letters blurred, then pressed the page flat with both palms, as if steadiness could be transferred by touch. Numbers settled where denial had been. Credit card balances around $45,000. A mortgage 90 days past due. Lines of credit opened in the last 4 years. And then a pattern emerged that felt like a cold hand on the back of my neck. Each spike, each new loan, each frantic application fell in the same months as Diane Mercer's health emergencies. Vertigo that required private specialists. Anxiety episodes that somehow demanded out-of-network care. Recoveries that coincided with expensive alternative protocols. Our family calendar had been a camouflage net. I called Raymond Nash, the estate attorney who had handled Aunt Lila Harrington's affairs. "Ray," I said, keeping my voice level, "I need a complete credit pull on my name and immediate monitoring." Something's wrong. By mid-afternoon, he rang back. "Evelyn," he said carefully, "your credit score dropped significantly in the past year. There are 2 cards and a personal loan that list you as applicant, all opened post-bereavement. Did you authorize any of this?" "No." I swallowed. "And there's more. I have a document with my signature that isn't mine. We'll preserve everything," he said. "Don't contact the suspected parties yet. I'll refer a financial crimes investigator if you're willing." "I'm willing." I was refilling the kettle when the doorbell rang. Through frosted glass, I saw Lauren on the porch, hair damp, clutching a boutique bag. When I opened the door, she lifted it with a hopeful smile. "A peace offering," she said. "Small batch maple syrup from the inn," Diane insisted. On another day, I might have laughed at the choreography sweetness packaged as reconciliation. Today, I stepped aside and let her in. We sat in the living room, the water iron-colored beyond the glass. She perched on the edge of the sofa, hands wrapped around her bag like a flotation device. "You surprised us," she began. "The house the post-Michael spiraled." Diane's worried. "About what?" "About you," she said too quickly. "About impulsive choices." I let the word hang there until it became embarrassing. "Lauren," I asked lightly, "how are Diane's treatments going? Which clinic is overseeing them now?" She blinked. "Boston or Burlington, they rotate." "Names." "Dr. Halverson?" Her voice lifted like a question. "Or Halverson. It's Nordic. And billing is through the clinic." "Mostly," she said, then added, "Diane handles it. You know how she is self-sufficient." I set the syrup on the table between us as if it were evidence. "How much has Michael given your mother in the last few years?" Her gaze flinched. "We're family," she said. "Sometimes we help each other." "That's not an amount," I don't know the numbers. I held her silence with mine. When she stood to go, the relief in her shoulders was visible. On the steps, she turned back. I hope you'll think about the communities we showed you, she said softly. It would make everyone feel safer. I'm sure it would, I said. Good night, Lauren. When the door closed, I forwarded Ray the photos I'd taken of the forged signature and the mortgage application. He replied with a single-line document chain preserved. I'm calling a contact in the state police. That night, unable to sleep, I did something I hadn't done in years. I looked at Lauren's public posts with the attention of a person who no longer assumed friendliness was proof. The photos were tidy, cheerful, curated. But the timeline snagged. She and Michael claimed they'd met at a summer conference on estate planning. Their first couple photos appeared in October, already settled, already fused into family. There were albums where Diane appeared as a smiling constant, birthdays, holidays, housewarmings, so central she might have been the one who owned the camera. I checked Diane's older posts. They stitched a different map. Florida, North Carolina, Georgia, cities tied to faint headlines I couldn't fully recall. Under a Christmas photo from years ago, teenagers called her Grandma Di. In a graduation album from another state, a caption read, "Couldn't have done it without you, Dee." She wasn't a satellite in other people's lives. She was a tide. At 10:58 p.m., the motion camera pinged a figure in the driveway. A car idled at the curb, headlights off. A woman walked to the back deck, tried the slider, and made a phone call that punctured the quiet with anxious gestures. Lauren's car. Lauren's silhouette. After 10 minutes, she left. I saved the clip and emailed it to Ray with the subject line, "For your file." The next morning, my phone vibrated with Michael's name. "Mom," he said, voice stripped of pride, "can you come over? I need to show you something. And I need to tell you the truth." He was pacing when I arrived, hands ink-smudged from rifling through papers. On the coffee table lay a neat disaster bank statements with transfers. I didn't recognize photos of my insurance documents, snapshots from family gatherings annotated with little notes about schedules and relationships, and a letter in tidy cursive that began with Mom but was definitely not addressed to me. He gestured helplessly. "I found a folder in Lauren's dresser," he said. These are our lives cataloged. She's been copying my files. Yours. The dates line up with..." He stopped. "I did it, Mom. The loans, the cards, the second mortgage. I forged your name. I told myself it was temporary just until Diane's appeals went through. I was trying to protect everyone." I sat. The ways we justify ourselves are always so reasonable in the moment. "How much?" I asked. "About $175,000, he said. "Maybe more if you count the accounts I didn't know about until now." "Where did the money go?" "To Diane's treatments," he said instantly. "To specialists. To a research fund she said would open access to experimental protocols." I told him what Ray had already found. Credit accounts in my name I hadn't opened to discrepancies that looked like an accountant's version of a confession and a trail of emergencies that always led to the same door. He went very still. "You think Diane isn't sick?" "I think Diane is very good at making other people feel responsible for her." He shook his head like a swimmer clearing water. "But Lauren, she loves me." "Michael," I said gently, "love and manipulation wear some of the same perfumes." He stared at the letter addressed Mom. I read over his shoulder. "The heart situation is progressing better than expected. M trusts me completely and still doesn't know about the additional lines of credit. E's recent purchase suggests hidden assets. We should accelerate before she asks too many questions." The letter named no names, just initials, but the geography was unmistakable. Michael folded it once, twice, then placed it on the table as if it might stain. "Don't call her," I said when he reached for his phone. "Don't tip anyone off. We need to involve the police." "Police," his voice cracked on the word. "Yes," I said. "Not because I want to punish you, but because we need this on record and we need help. We're in water deeper than apologies." An hour later at my kitchen table, Detective Kara Bennett from the State Police Financial Crimes Unit clicked a pen and began. Calm, precise, unflappable, she handled our documents like a surgeon. "This isn't improvisation," she said after 20 minutes. "It's a pattern. And if it's a pattern, it's likely your in-laws have run it before." Ray had done more digging of his own. By early afternoon, he called with a voice that sounded like a warning bell. "Evelyn?" He said Diane Mercer is an alias. Her legal name appears to be Diane Warren. She has prior arrests: elder fraud in Florida, insurance fraud in North Carolina. Dismissed or pled down, but the footprints are there. I close my eyes for a beat, and Lauren. Birth records match a Lauren Warren, born mid-1980s, he said. Your daughter-in-law's degree doesn't verify, and the employer she claims never had her on payroll. Kara's pen stopped moving. Mother-daughter, she said. Not a coincidence in operation. By late day, we were at the bank with Kara freezing everything that could be frozen and flagging what couldn't. The branch manager, a woman with a voice like velvet and a stare like steel, scanned a screen and frowned. Mrs. Hart. She said yesterday, we blocked an attempted wire transfer of $2.2 million from your investment account to an offshore institution. The request came with a forged power of attorney. Our fraud team flagged anomalies and halted it. Kara's look told me what I already knew: the timeline had accelerated. Someone had realized we were no longer asleep. That evening, I brewed tea I didn't drink and waited for something I couldn't name. It arrived at 8:11 p.m. as a call from an unknown number. "Hello, Evelyn," a woman said in a voice I recognized and wanted to forget. "It seems you've been doing your homework." "Hello, Diane," I said, using the name she preferred to the one that might be waiting on a warrant. She laughed, a sound that tried to be social and landed as sharp. "You've created a logistical nightmare for me. Investigators, frozen accounts, lawyers. I'm too old for the adrenaline." "You're not too old for fraud," I said. "Let's not be dramatic," she cooed. "We can be practical. You will call off the investigation. You will instruct your bank to unfreeze the accounts you've frozen. And you will deliver a cashier's check for $2.8 million as, let's call it, a gesture of goodwill. And if I don't, then the world learns interesting things about the Hart finances." She said, her tone suddenly free of velvet. "Your late husband's tax arrangements, for instance. The shell companies. The filings your son signed without reading. Imagine the headlines. Imagine the IRS." My fingers went cold around the phone. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" "You think I wandered into your lives without research? Please, I know where the bodies would be buried if you had any. Consider my offer a kindness." I let silence stretch until it threatened to snap. "I need time," I said finally. 24 hours, she replied. "I'll call with instructions. If I smell a cop in the room, we both get to enjoy long federal conversations." The line went dead. I sat in the kitchen where only a clock dared make noise and understood that something elemental had shifted. This was no longer about money. This was about whether fear got to choose our future. I dialed Kara. She called, I said. She wants money in silence. She threatened to go public with my husband's mistakes. "Can you stand?" That Kara asked, no judgment in it, only logistics. "I can stand almost anything that isn't her owning me," I said. "If there are consequences, we'll face them." "Good," she said. Then we set a controlled call. "We'll record the demand. We'll set surveillance at potential pickup points. We'll coordinate with the DA. It won't be pretty, but it will be ours." After I hung up, I called Michael. We didn't talk about the numbers. We didn't rehearse our shame. We talked about engineering a future where apology wasn't a currency and where love didn't mean a parental leash. When the house was finally quiet, I took Aunt Lila's letter from the drawer and read the last paragraph again. "You don't owe the world your smallness." I placed it under a paperweight shaped like a harbor stone and told the room I would try to live up to both. Tomorrow, Diane would call back. Tomorrow, the recording device would be taped to my ribcage and I would speak calmly into a trap we had built on purpose. Tomorrow, fear would have its say, and then if I was brave, would not get the last word. For the first time in weeks, I slept. The next evening, Detective Kara Bennett clipped a recorder under my blouse and rehearsed the script with me one last time. 2 surveillance teams waited at likely pickup points. Raymond Nash sat at my table with a legal pad and the patient calm of someone who has seen worse and expects better. At 8:00 p.m., the unknown number returned. "Have you decided?" Evelyn Diane asked, voice lacquered. "Yes," I said. "No payment, no unfreezing, no silence." A pause. Then the pleasant tone she used before drawing blood. "Then the world will learn about the Hart finances. The filings your late husband hid. The papers your son signed. Consider that my courtesy.
Consider this mine, I replied. Every word you just said is being recorded. The line went dead. Kara lifted a hand steady. The transcript captured what mattered: the demand, the threats, and the reference to forged authority. It would be enough. By morning, the fallout began. A local paper ran an anonymous packet of documents about my husband's tax maneuvers. The IRS received its twin. The old fear Rose tried the door and found it locked. I told Michael everything what I'd learned years ago about his father's mistakes, what I hadn't had the courage to name. He told me everything too. The forged forms, the loans, the way shame wears the mask of duty. We hired specialists. We opened every drawer to the light. The penalties were painful, roughly $1.8 million in taxes and fees. But this time, the cost bought something I could use a life without bargaining with bullies. Meanwhile, the investigation widened. Kara's unit tied Diane and Lauren to similar schemes in other states. Their pattern was consistent. Befriend a family with aging assets, create urgency siphon funds, and disappear when questions grow teeth. A judge signed warrants. Banks froze what could still be frozen. Someone tried one last pass at my accounts with another counterfeit power of attorney. The system flagged it and the trail hardened. Weeks later, the call came. We found them, Kara said. Puerto Vallarta, working a new family. Local authorities intercepted them at a transfer office. Charges stacked like bricks. Wire fraud, identity theft, extortion, conspiracy. Extradition followed. Of the money that had left our house over 4 years, investigators clawed back several $100,000, not victory exactly, but proof that the future didn't belong to them.
Michael filed for divorce. He sold the house that held too much choreography and bought a smaller place 10 minutes from my bluff. Some evenings we ate simple food and practiced a new language apology without theater care, without control. He deleted the bank alerts. He learned to ask, "What do you want?" and to wait for the answer. As for me, I kept the villa. Not because I needed the square footage, but because the house had become a sentence I could finally finish. I replaced anxiety with maintenance schedules, added locks where I wanted them, and hung Aunt Lila's letter by my desk where the last line could do its work. You don't owe the world your smallness.
Spring reached the water in long, slow breaths. I signed updated documents with my own hand. I booked a trip I'd postponed for 20 years. I joined an art class and made friends who knew me as Evelyn, not as anyone's obligation. Sometimes people say independence is lonely. Sometimes it is. But there is a kind of quiet that isn't absence, it's ownership. It sounds like a deck at dusk, a phone switched off, and a woman deciding that the truest thing she can do with her life is to live it even if the chorus disapproves. The villa was never just a purchase. It was a border I drew and then kept. On clear days, the sound turns silver and the horizon looks like permission. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story. I'll see you next time as we continue exploring more journeys and lessons together.